back to another episode of My Soul Connection. I'm your host, Billy K. Kavert. With me today is William A. Donius, a New York Times bestselling author of Thought Revolution, How to Unlock Your Inner Genius. Bill brings a truly fascinating approach to personal transformation. It's one that bridges science, creativity, and self-discovery in a way that helps people break free from old patterns and access deeper levels of truth and insight. With 30 years of experience in the corporate world and a former banker and CEO of Pulaski Bank in St. Louis, where he oversaw eightfold growth over a 12-year period, Bill also teaches his creative method of problem solving to a wide range of corporations and blogs for the Huffington Post. In Thought Revolution, Bill introduces a unique method of tapping into the right side of the brain with what he calls non-dominant handwriting, to bypass our usual left brain logic and unlock creative, intuitive answers that live just beneath the surface. It's a process rooted in neuroscience, yet it's deeply personal in its impact. Whether you're stuck in a decision, searching for purpose, or simply curious about how to access more of your own inner wisdom, Bill's work offers a powerful and surprising path inward. I'm really excited for you to hear his story and learn how his technique has helped CEOs, creatives, and everyday people awaken to new possibilities. I hope you enjoy this conversation with Bill Donius. Bill, thank you so much for joining me today. I so appreciate your being here on My Soul Connection. I am very grateful for you because I think that you have a lot of things going on in your life, and it just shows the depths of your generosity to be here with somebody you really don't know very well. But I know that you're a very giving person and you want to help people. And I think that the theme of My Soul Connection really connects to some of the work that you're doing as well.
Well, based on the questions you asked me by email, I think you're very thoughtful and reflective, and I think I'm not going to be surprised by anything you ask.
Well, good. I kind of wanted to let the audience know how we first met. Last fall, I decided to check out for the first time Esalen, the retreat center in Big Sur in Central California, on the Central Coast. For those who don't know who or what Esalen is, it's one of the most amazing retreat centers I've ever been to, and I've been to quite a few. It has these absolutely breathtaking views of the Pacific Ocean. They also offer these wide variety of workshops throughout the year, and there's a little something for everybody there. And when I saw yours, it just really hit me. I immediately knew that's the one I wanted to attend. It was called Unlock Your Intuitive Mind. And it was a 2-day workshop focused on intuitive writing and tapping into your higher consciousness. And the goal is really to unlock your right brain, which is where the kind of creative center comes from, the, intuition, and find some new creative solutions to your life, whether it be about business, career, relationships, etc. It was a great weekend. Met some lovely people along the way too. And before we get into the nuts and bolts about what you actually teach in the book, I want to just understand a little bit more or really reflect on why it's important to be able to tap into your intuition and how you were able to do that in your own life. So you shared with us at the workshop and in your book that you got into banking in your early 30s, and it was something that was sort of natural for you because your father and your grandfather were both bankers, and you became very successful, as did the bank. The bank went public, and you became the chairman and CEO. But eventually, after putting a lot of hours in and you were working a lot, you said you became kind of unfulfilled and felt alone. So tell us a little bit about that time in your life and what happened next.
Yeah, well, I feel, thanks for the question. I feel a little bit like the Forrest Gump of business and corporate experiences because I've had so many interesting segments. So I did 20 years in banking. So I felt like that was a wonderful 20 years. And when I first was getting into banking, somebody made the comment, "Oh, enjoy it. It's a great 10-year career." And I was like, "What do you mean by that?" And they said, "Yeah, after 10 years, you'll have done everything once and you'll be complete." And so I realized after 20 years what they were talking about because it did become a little redundant. Mm-hmm. And I think it's also a great metaphor for why a lot of us, including me, we feel, we're like the lobster in the pot. We get comfortable. We're paid well. It's easy. We keep doing it. But then when we really begin to look at the rest of our lives, what we want to do, what's important, what we're passionate about, oftentimes there's some things that we discover that are missing. And so in me, in that case, I felt like there were just too many other things I wanted to do and
Hmm.
discover, and I was curious about. So I felt it was time to move on. And I was also fortunate financially that I was able to take this deep dive and spend 3 years doing interviews, writing a book, talking to, all these bright people all around the world in neuroscience and psychology and creative thinking. And so it was a wonderful experience. But in fact, even prior to banking, I had 12 years of four different industries. So I felt like I was one that had explored a lot and learned a lot along the way. But I also felt like I was unwilling to settle and just kind of get overly comfortable. So I've always been, although banking, I didn't expect to be in it for 20 years. It was a great experience for what it was.
Well, I can certainly relate to a lot of what you said. And in fact, when we spoke kind of privately at the retreat, I remember you telling me, well, I remember you telling the group, I think you were like 48 years old or something when you were kind of starting to venture off and think about other things. And it happens to be how old I am and where I'm at in my life too. So you had mentioned during the workshop too that you had, gone through some therapy and read a really profound book that helped get you out of some of the, or I guess maybe expose and allow you to deal with some of the trauma that you'd had in your past. But you also discovered at that time intuitive writing. So how did intuitive writing begin and what did it reveal to you initially?
Thank you. The intuitive writing really helped me at a point in my life at age 38 when I had already taken the company public and was kind of feeling good about so many things professionally, but not as good about my personal life, and felt that there was something missing there. And because I realized I hadn't been as successful in personal, intimate relationships as I had been in my business life. So I felt that it was probably time to attend to that. So went into therapy to do so. And it was basically a year in when I was ready to quit. When I said to my therapist, gosh, can we speed this up? Because, I have a busy schedule and taking time out every week to come here is good, but I feel like it's going slow. And she handed me a book by Lucia Capagnoni, who ended up studying with 10 years later, interestingly enough,
Oh,
who
wow.
wrote the book, Recovery of Your Inner Child. And she, in psychology, launched the whole inner child movement, which was super helpful globally. And it really is about the premise of which my book is based on. It's based on the Nobel Prize winning discovery from Dr. Roger Sperry about hemispheric division in the brain,
Uh-huh.
which is to say that we have essentially two brains in our mind. We have the left hemisphere, which is the linear, logical, analytical. And then we have the right side, which is the intuitive, creative, artistic part of the brain, higher consciousness. And it turns out that especially when we're stuck, either with a business problem or a personal problem, that we can learn to become more intuitive by activating that right side of the brain and getting answers and insights for the stuff that's held us back for
Right.
potentially years or decades even. So in my case, working through an understanding that there was trauma from childhood that I didn't know about. It had been repressed. I had no awareness, except I had the symptoms, and I was behaving in a way that was consistent with that. So understanding the who, what, where, why, and how, and then focusing on what to do about it was really speeded up by the insights that I got from my right brain, and it made a huge difference. And then I realized I could use it for more than just working through that trauma. I could use it as a creative problem-solving tool in business, help in my personal life. So it became something I became very, I guess, impressed by, enamored by, and then so much so that I was willing to go off and do research on this topic to see if I could add anything to the discussion. And so I ended up writing my own book that is more of a layman's approach to a lay person's approach to this work versus, somebody who's been quote abused or something, like. So
Right.
it's more accessible to the average person, I guess, was what my thought was.
And you said that it was the intuitive writing that actually gave you the nudge to write the book, right? And how did that specifically unfold? And for those who are watching, by the way, I'm just going to hold up a copy of the book here, Thought Revolution, and we'll put it in the show notes as well. But what was the nudge that you got? Was it just a simple like, hey, you should write a book about intuitive writing, or how did that come out?
Yeah, yeah, it was much, I guess I was as surprised to get that nudge as I was at age 38 when I got the nudge that and the specific messaging around the fact that it was that my lack of success and difficulty with intimacy had to deal with prior abuse.
Mm,
Because sadly, with people that are abused in any kind of way, it's when you're connecting the wires, they get disconnected,
hmm.
and then you have to basically kind of reconnect them in a healthy way. And so when I got that revelation back then, it was the big aha, and I went down that path and figured it out and corrected it. And then at 10 years later, at age 48, I had also applied this process at the company, and it was very helpful in creative problem solving. And then when I was at a retreat, thinking about the rest of my life over New Year's, I asked the question, what's the highest and best purpose of the rest of my life? And I realized I was fortunate financially and had done well and had already had a boatload of experiences in my first decades. And so I was thinking I was going to be something more mundane. But what I got instead was from the lens, as I call it, of my right brain, the right brain insight was to help people. I
Hmm.
was like, okay, that's kind of trite. And I felt like I was already doing that to some extent, certainly as a banker, but it was more, then I asked the follow-up question, well, how? Like, what am I supposed to do? And then I got, write a book. And then it's like, on what? And then I got on this topic that has been so helpful for you in the last 10 years, because you could write this from your perspective and reach more people, and that would be worthwhile. You could help people in their lives and their jobs and their personal lives. And I was kind of like, I didn't know if I really kind of believed it and even accepted it. And then as the weeks went on, I thought, you know what, that's probably a good idea, because I could see and realize how helpful it was to me. So I decided to do that. And I thought, well, I'm not committing. I'm going to do a bunch of interviews, which I did 200. And I thought if
Wow.
those 200 interviews really help people and suggest that it's helpful, then there'll be a book in there somewhere. So that's exactly what happened over 3 years.
That's awesome, because it's such a huge question that you first asked, but you just kind of kept whittling it down until you got the very specific answers that you needed. And I think there's a lot to be said for the fact that you had to trust what you were hearing too, and then take those first few steps forward, because it's easy to get an intuitive ping. I think a lot of people get them and either don't know what they are or just don't pay attention to them and don't trust them. And so you really have to
Yeah.
kind of trust the process, right? So,
You're 100% right. And I think part of the reason we don't trust it as much is that, when you think of coming out of the caveman era, if we were cave people
mhm.
and we got an intuition, we probably followed it because it probably meant there was an animal lurking around that could kill us.
Right.
And so we trusted it then, but now we live in this like super linear, logical, analytical society. And the left side of the brain controls the right side of the body. 92% of us are right-handed. And so we're in this process where it all has to make sense. It all has to be very linear and logical. And so when we get this intuition, we're like, that's like, what is that? I can't qualify that. I can't
Yeah.
quantify that. And importantly, it's not even written down. It's something we just feel, and we can't we don't even know if we can validate it because
Right.
it's just feels so elusive and so ethereal. So part of the process that is effective in this right brain activation, people are writing down the intuition. So when you see it in writing, it takes on a different shape and form, and you have a chance to reflect back on it, and it becomes literally more tangible. And as a consequence, you're thinking differently about it. And of course, the brain works; both sides work together, as we know, but it has a chance to integrate better, I think.
Right. No, that's an excellent point, especially I think of all the podcasts I've listened to and the books I've read and all that I consume a lot of information, right? But it's so easy to just get back out there in our busy lives. And I've got kids and work and running around like crazy. And I forget some of the stuff that was said to me or that really meant something to me too. So writing it down in a journal and having something that you can reflect back on that were your words coming from your own
Yeah.
subconscious makes a big
And
difference. So,
the big aha is when we get these big ahas
mhm.
that we know, and it's not like a friend saying, "Oh, you should go and do this or do that," and they're well intended, certainly, but when we get that counsel from our inner wisdom, from our higher consciousness. And it's also interestingly for people, I'm sure you have, based on your profession, been on sales calls, and especially a junior salesperson sits quietly while the senior person makes the pitch and listens, and then they both walk out, and potentially the junior person has a different point of view because they were able to listen and soak the energy in the room, observe how people were responding, not responding. And so the right brain is a little bit like that, the quiet part, because it doesn't really have a voice, a way to punch through absent a dream, a moment, an aha, in the shower, riding a bike, listening to music. And so we don't even have a pen handy. So a lot of times we don't pay much attention to it. It's just a fleeting thought.
Right.
So the capturing it in writing and really being able to value what you've got is important. And to your the bigger question of, is it relevant to the soul's journey? So the right side of the brain is representative of our higher consciousness. So by definition, it's very connected to
Sure.
what the soul knows about us, why we even incarnated into this body and form. So when we're getting that piece of wisdom from that part of our brain that's connected to the soul's journey in this lifetime, you better believe that it's going to be important information because it's like at the highest source.
Right.
It's like to the most important things we're here to learn.
Absolutely. I completely agree. And I love how in the book, you really kind of differentiate the way the right brain and the left brain works. And it kind of coincides with what you're talking about right now. Like the left brain is very survival focused. It's seeking pleasure and control. And it's the one that's always in control, like kind of from an operating standpoint on a day-to-day basis, where the right brain's did I say the left brain first? I think I said that right, but
Yes.
okay.
Yes.
And the right brain is more of the connection to your higher self, your creative potential. You mentioned too that the left brain acts as sort of a guard to ensure that our experience goes a certain way. And you've mentioned control a couple times in the book. I happen to be somebody who's working on not being so controlling as well, so that spoke to me. And the right brain being responsible for creative expression tends to stay passive and let the left brain take over and run the show. And that's something that I have had to really learn to slow down and pay attention to. I'll talk a little bit more about this as we go, but I had kind of a spiritual awakening over the last 8 years. And ever since that moment, you get to a point where you can't unsee it anymore. And I will so notice when my logical protective side kind of takes over and is trying to quiet my intuition or quiet what my nature really is. And it's just, but you've got to learn how to sort of switch it on in a way and let the right brain have a voice.
Yes, and congratulations, by the way, on that breakthrough and that progress because it's not easy. It's so
No.
much easier. I mean, we are by definition, creatures of habit. We don't like change. It's why, the when we're admonished in strategy sessions to think outside the box, it's
Hmm.
why it's so difficult because we get what scientists would say encultured, en cultured in
Right.
habits and routines because we just stay in that zone and we know it. It's familiar. It's not risky. It's the path we're on, and yet it can get to the point where we can let that path run out through our entire lifetime, but there are times where we begin to get, I guess, we begin to just get curious and question if there's anything else. Is this all there is to life, to my life, to life in general, to those big existential questions? Is there anything more to consider?
Sure.
And and when we do, and everybody can have their own process for how to get there. In my experience, I've just not found one that's faster and more effective than learning how to activate the neural pathways to get to that right side. It's just as I think you experience in the workshop. It's like this superpower that
Right.
we have, but we don't realize we have it. So we don't trust it. We don't even know we can use it. But once we see it working and we see a couple good insights come forth, then we're like, okay, this is good. I'm going to keep doing this because what else can I do in 60 seconds? You
Right.
know, that it's so fast.
It
I
is.
mean, we
It's
can't
immediate.
do almost anything in 60 seconds. So it's very helpful.
Bill, one of the quotes from your book that I really, really loved, and it kind of encapsulates a lot of what you were just talking about, is you said life can be what we came to learn or what we choose to suppress. I thought that was very thought provoking because I think we go through so many years of life not realizing what we are suppressing or how much we are suppressing. And so I just think this process is really going to help people kind of uncover those things and work through them in a very, like the tool itself is kind of it's a very logical, easy way to work through it. It's just making the time to do it and ask the right questions and reflect back on it and make sure that we're paying attention to everything that's coming up. And as we spoke about earlier, just trust our own intuition and trust what it's telling us.
Yeah, and it does require that we summon a bit of courage too, and a courage and curiosity,
Hmm.
because again, we have to get out of that comfort zone. And so we have to have the courage and the curiosity to get out of that comfort zone. And at least one way to think about it is at least reflect. But maybe we give ourselves an hour, once a month or once a week to reflect on our life, what's working, what isn't working, what direction we want to go in, what we want to change, what we want to, drop completely,
Hmm.
and just to give ourselves, because I think it's so easy to get wrapped in these busy, busy, busy lives that we don't have any time for reflection, that we have to just keep go, 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 just doing the basics, and then a decade goes by or 2 decades go by or 3 decades go by and they're like, whoa. So for me, part of it is I guess I've always been a little bit of a procrastinator. So it's sort of like,
Hmm.
damn, it's time's a flying. Like, how many more decades do I get to live? And if I want to make a change, like I don't want to be doing it at 80 or 90.
Right.
It's better to be doing it at 50 than any later on in life.
Yeah, and I think that's a common theme that's come up with some of the other interviews I've had is just about how American culture is so focused on productivity that we get into this loop and this busyness where we don't really take that time out. But it's also even coming from the career that you came from, there's a reward loop there too, right? You were making great money, you were externally very successful, so it's hard to sometimes like from the outside, it's easy to go, well, what's wrong with his life? Everything's great. And that's why I think it makes it easy for us to sort of procrastinate and not dig in too much either, because, you know, you hear people say all the time, gosh, I have everything I want. I'm married and I have kids and I have this great job and all this stuff, but I'm still not happy and I'm not fulfilled. And that's why, because there's something deeper going on that we're ignoring.
Yeah, it's sort of like migrating up Maslow's hierarchy, right? Once we've got food, shelter in place, then we're looking towards those higher level ambitions up to self-actualization, where
Hmm.
we feel like we're fulfilling the purpose of what we're here to learn, what we're here to do, what we're here to give back. And that's very different than just checking the boxes at the lower level for house and car and food and shelter and family and all that kind of stuff. Those are important too, but it's like it doesn't end there.
Right.
It sort of begins, the next stages begin from there.
Yeah, totally agree. The one important point I want to make too, that I thought was a very relevant point in your book, and is something I'm really passionate about just in life and with whatever pursuits I go after in this next chapter of my life, is that you said intuition is free and it's a universal tool. It's accessible regardless of income, background, you know, race, ethnicity, everything else. I think that's so important because I look back at all of the coaching I've done and therapy I've done after I had that spiritual awakening I mentioned. And I would get, there were times where I'd get stuck in something in my own head and I'd think, oh, I have to call my coach or I have to set up another therapy appointment. And after a while, I'm like, you know, okay, you've been at this for quite some time. You've got it within you. It's in there. You just have to get quiet. You know, if you're going to spend an hour with a therapist and pay them 150, $200 or whatever, why not do it for free and access it in your own home? Just carve out an hour. We have it there, you know?
100%. I think we are also in a culture where we've become dependent on others to a great extent. And we have bosses that tell us what to do, or boards that tell us what to do. And at work, and then at home, we have spouses. And so we're always, we can always go to somebody for advice or even being told what to do in some cases. And so we're in this mindset of that robotic almost mindset. And so it's easier to, again, do the frequent and consistent and expected thing, which is to talk to the coach or the therapist or the boss or the spouse and just say, well, what do you think? And, and it's kind of, it's a kind of knee-jerk reaction and a little bit of a cheat, obviously. And in part because we may not know that we've got inside our mind, as Michael Gazzaniga wrote a 900-page book he studied with Dr. Roger Sperry titled Of Two Minds. So if you want to read the 900 pages of why, we've got these two minds that exist inside our head, and yet it's like we don't even know. We haven't met the other half. We haven't met our, and another workshop is titled Meet Your Better Half, because in my experience, that better half is the right side of our brain, but it's like we don't even know it's there. It's
Right.
this superpower that we have. We've kind of forgotten that it's there. It sort of aligns with what Albert Einstein said. He said, we live in a world where we worship the logical and the practical, and we've forgotten the sacred gift and the sacred gift comes from the right side of the brain, and we worship the linear and logical, and we've forgotten the gift. So we're just
Right.
methodically going through, and also in a world where that's increasing daily, being disrupted by AI, all that linear logical stuff is going to be done better
It's taken over. Yep.
AI. So all these jobs are going to be, outsourced to AI at some point, to writing contracts and lyrics and whatever it may be,
Right.
computer code, and so we have our own creativity, and intuition is going to be the stuff that can't easily be replicated, duplicated by AI. So that's the stuff that we can bring: the artistry, the music, the the stuff that isn't linear and logical, that we have to create through the lens of our own brain to bring it to manifest into the world. So that's the really super cool, exciting stuff. But if we've never experienced, we don't even necessarily know what's there.
Yeah, it's such a great point. And I think we've gotten throughout history, let's say the last couple of generations anyway, there's been a very big push in the American household to go get your college degree and get a good, stable job. You don't have to like it. You just have to, it just has to be stable and bring home the bacon. And to your point, now we're at a time in our nation's history where AI is going to take over a lot of those jobs, and we have to find our own unique sort of secret sauce to make ourselves still relevant. And if we don't even know what that is about ourselves, how are we going to move forward in the world? And certainly, like, my children are going to have to think about that more than anything. So it's a good lesson for parenting too. So
let me turn the tables on you, Kay, and ask you this question, if I may. When you had that spiritual awakening, what was it that you decided to do differently, or how did that change your life?
Oh gosh, how much time do you have? So it was a pretty big. Yeah, true. That's true. No, I would say I pretty much changed everything about my life, but not as it appeared externally. So I had a kind of a big bombshell go off in my marriage, and I'm speaking very publicly about this stuff anyway. And I'm still married, by the way, after 20 years and a lot of therapy and my own intuitive work. So we're doing good. But there was just this sense when this stuff happened in my marriage that it was all about the marriage, and I started recognizing that it really wasn't about the marriage at all, that it was about me personally and how I was feeling inside, and my husband the same way. And there was just a lot of, kind of going back to some of the inner child work, a lot of that I had to explore, where I realized so much of the way that I behaved and the way I attacked the world, because I very much attacked the world. I was somebody that was brought up with just a lot of masculine energy. I told you before we started, my name is Billy Kay. The Billy side of me, the boy side of me. I was a tomboy when I was growing up. I was just a lot of masculine energy in a male-dominated sales force for all these years. And I just attacked the world in a way that wasn't it. In a way, it brought me some external success and I learned a lot from it, and I don't regret any of it. But when I started to really tap into my intuition and to my own spirituality and deeper thinking, and just trying to see things from a different perspective, and my own feminine energy too, it opened up a whole new world to me of the way life could be. And it didn't always have to be a fight. It didn't always have to be something I had to go after. There was a way to to intuit through life, right? And so what's really changed is not visible to a lot of people, although my good friends and family who've known me for years have seen a change in me, but it's really been more of the way that I process information and I view the world, and I try not to get stuck in these patterns anymore. And I do things like, after learning these tools from your workshop, I spend time slowing down and making sure that I'm making decisions based on what's really right for my soul, and not just what appears to be right from a cultural perspective. So it shifted everything, really. It shifted all of my relationships with my friends, with my husband, with my kids, and just how I feel about myself. The level of fulfillment that I have in life has changed dramatically. So it's been huge.
Bravo. Good for you. I mean, that was clearly a big, important breakthrough, taking you from what some describe, I like the term winning formula. You had a winning formula that was working for you. And so it's very tempting just to keep that winning formula going. And yet something is gnawing at you, is going like, there's more here, something's missing, something. And so you persevered and broke through to your truth and to what was missing. And it sounds like now you're leading a life that is intentional, and it's not accidental, but you're very intentional about who you are, how you show up in your marriage, how you show up as a mother, how you show up with your friends. And it's also very authentic. You're not trying to be this, trying to be that. I mean, you are who you are, and you know who you are, and that's a powerful combination when you can be intentional and authentic. I think it's also a much more rewarding way to live, right? I mean, you feel like you're really living into what you're here to learn, observe, fulfill your soul's journey, your destiny, learn the lessons, so
Absolutely.
that's really what it's all about.
Yeah, well, thank you for all of that acknowledgement. That's exactly how I feel about it, and living with intentionality is definitely a key component. And it reminds me actually of one of the exercises that you had us do at the workshop, which was the animal exercise. And you talk about this in your book as well. And you just asked a very simple question: if I were an animal, what would I be? And you had us write with our dominant hand on the first day, answer that question. I I think I answered a Labrador Retriever. Not shocking that I have a Labrador Retriever, so it was probably just the first thing that came to mind. But externally, I can see how that could work because I'm energetic and spontaneous and loyal and
Mhm.
fun loving, just like labs are. But that's not really like what's deep down inside either. And the next day when we came back, you had us ask the question again after we kind of had a night of sleep and a clean slate, and we wrote with our non-dominant hand, and I came up with eagle. And I at the time I was like, I don't know where that came from. I don't know what that's all about. But as I started to reflect on it with my non-dominant hand too, by the way, I found, well, I do have a love of nature. I love to be free. I love the idea of freedom and not being confined to a schedule or a certain way of being. I like seeing a lot of different perspectives of the world. So having like that 360-degree view from the air sounds right. And eagles have a lot of power and confidence, but not in an aggressive way, right? It's just like it's just a different level of power and confidence. And so it really opened up some different thoughts about myself when I came up with that. It was an
Well,
interesting
and what I've
exercise.
learned in these all these years of doing 16 years now of doing the interviews and initially in that and sharing this process all around the world, and I teach this in Switzerland now at the business school there too, by the way,
Oh, wow.
is that what happens there is that we're actually experiencing the hemispheric division that exists in our brain, and we're getting it as proof because it's not that one is true and one is false, is that both are true about ourselves, right? There's
Hmm.
the Labrador qualities that you inhabit, and that those might be, as I've come to realize, maybe aspirational. And then the right brain identifies through the courtesy and of the non-dominant hand through those neural pathways when provoked. And again, to make clear, it's not just non-dominant sloppy handwriting. It's a exercise that's triggered by activating the right side of the brain, and it just travels through the neural pathways. The thought does down into the non-dominant hand onto the page, and it's that separate, independent idea of the eagle that's also true about you and represents a different part of yourself. And my thesis there is that that's the part. The right brain is identifying what is more representationally true about how you are. So I always, as you probably recall, I always suggest people do the spouse test and ask them, am I more Labrador or eagle? And surprisingly, most people say that it's the animal they wrote down second that they didn't even think about when they had the first chance to think about it. And some cases don't even know why they wrote that animal down, that the spouse says, yeah, you're more like that. So I think
Oh,
it's speaking this truth, this sort of inner truth that otherwise is hidden. We just don't uncover. It's like playing checkers your whole life, and then somebody brings over a chessboard, and you go, "Whoa, you mean
yeah.
this can do all of that?" So it's a more complex, nuanced game that we can learn and maybe like more than just the more basic kind of checkers moves that happen on the same kind of board.
That's a great analogy. And I don't recall you saying that about the spouses. So I'm going to have to ask my husband about that tonight. I'll have to quiz
Oh
him.
yeah.
Yeah. That's great. Well,
I'll give you 5-1 odds on that.
okay. Yeah. I'll report back.
Okay.
So you started, I wanted to get into this anyway, and you were sort of naturally going there to explain the actual process of writing or explain how writing with a non-dominant hand reveals the deeper truth. And you were sort of getting into the neuroscience of it. So tell us a little bit more about how it actually works
Yeah. So
and what you would suggest as a practice.
okay. Sure.
Yeah.
This process was discovered by Dr. Roger Sperry in the work that he began in the 50s with patients that had epilepsy. And what they were doing as a potential cure for the symptoms is they were cutting the corpus callosum, which connects the left hemisphere and right. And what they found is that would stop the symptoms that they were experiencing. And it also, the byproduct was they found that if you said to one of those patients, grab the yellow marker, they would reach out with both hands, having heard the command through both sides of their brain, and they'd be in a tug of war with themselves. So there's still great YouTube footage of those experiments dating back to the 50s and 60s. If you Google split brain patients, you'll see that footage. And so they discovered then what the functions are of the left side of the brain, the linear, logical, mathematical, organizational, and then what the functions of the right side of the brain, the artistic, creative, problem solving, higher consciousness, music, artistry, and more. And so they discovered that they exist separately, independently, and then through the limbic system, corpus callosum, they all work together at all of the time. But they also discovered that you can activate that side specifically and get a more of a independent answer that is by virtue of activating the neural pathways to the right side of the brain. So that part is unusual because it's never really been studied to the extent that his initial work was done on the hemispheric division that exists. And so for many, drawing on the right side of the brain, changed the way we draw because it gets drawing out of our head and into being able to see the object differently through the lens of our right brain. His book helps with trauma. And so my work was designed to help in just problem solving and creative problem solving, figuring out life's paths and life's journey. And it's been around since 1980 essentially, and people have been using this, doing this, but I don't know that it's still reached a kind of critical mass because in some cases it probably seems to, and I can say this as a former banker, the warning sign is when something seems too good to be true, it probably is. And so in this case, it seems too easy and too good to be true that we could spark a independent thought and get an independent thought from our own brain that gave us a different thought. 60 seconds later, we can be coming up with a completely, in some cases, contrary thought and both are true and both are from our own brains. And then we get to decide what really, makes the most sense, what we value. So then in most cases, people can quickly discern that, maybe one makes more sense or another. But in my experience, I found that oftentimes it's those right brain, as I call them RBIs, those right brain insights are incredibly valuable. And probably 80% of the time, I'm acting out on those and valuing those and following that counsel, if you will.
Right. That's awesome. And I've used your technique going on a year now, just kind of an everyday journaling practice, but particularly when I get really stuck on something. But how are you using it in your life? Do you use it every day? Is it something that you're just constantly at?
The answer should be yes.
Right.
I would say it's not every day, but it's certainly multiple times a week. And
right.
And it's 100% of the times that where something important is at stake. Like,
Right.
even including like, where do I want to go on vacation this year? And, and you can look at the whole world and say, oh gosh, where do I want to go? And I can be thinking about it one way and then put it through my right brain. And oftentimes very different answers come up. And it's not just a one and done. It's a why. Why do I want to go there? And it's because of blah, 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 blah. And so that's
Right.
interesting, and it brings a different point of view. I absolutely always also use it when I'm working with clients. It's
Hmm.
with these, I've been fortunate to work with these big global clients, like Hitachi and Kawasaki and the US Federal Reserve System. And it's like, okay, how can I help them? What is it that I need to bring into the mix? And then once the ideation process is done with them, and I'm doing a summation for them, their ideas carry the day. But what I'll also do at the end of that is ask the question: is there anything else I should include in this summation report?
Mm.
Given everything that's happened and given everything I've observed and learned and that they created, is there anything else that would help? And oftentimes there is one or two things that are additive, so I include those. So it's a really I used it in my hiring capacity as a helpful hiring tip on which candidate to hire, A, B, C, D, and
Hmm.
I'd be thinking maybe it's B, and I'd put that through my right brain and go, which candidate is the best for this job? And I might get C, and I said, well, why? And then I get an interesting response as to why that candidate is better. And what I learned from that is we tend to hire in our own image. So a lot of times we're hiring the person that we like and we think is, close to us and we connect with and we want to have a beer with, so to speak. But that may not be the right skill set for that job that is needed. So it's a way of really differentiating the skills that are needed and getting a better understanding of the why another person might be better.
Yeah, I love that example from the book because as I mentioned, I came into an industry that was heavily male dominated. And I remember first thinking, gosh, don't they hire any women around here? And this was about 16 years ago.
Yeah.
And that has changed quite a bit since then. Our meetings look very different. But I actually inquired about this with some of our corporate leaders a couple of times. And that was exactly the sentiment. It's like, well, people have gotten in the habit of just hiring who they like or who they can relate to with hobbies and things like that they talk about in the interview process instead of what's really needed for this job or for this territory or for this specific client or whatever it is. And I love that example for that reason. It really gets you out of your generic thinking and into what's specifically
And
best for
it's
this.
back to that comfort zone. We're
Hmm.
very married to that comfort zone because it keeps us safe and doesn't rock the boat. And so it's very hard to punch through that.
Yeah. I think it's interesting too that you're doing the consulting for these large companies and using this process to help them get to more creative business solutions and get past their own stuckness. Yet you're also using the tool to prepare for these meetings and to write the summaries. And it's like every aspect of that whole process is covered through this
Yeah, and
with
then
this tool.
the other hopeful piece is that the hope is that and everybody does what they want, but a number of clients end up buying and providing the book for their employees, and then the hope is that it sort of Trojan horses this process into the employees' lives, because what I hope will happen is that if the employee is getting a great demonstration in service of the company and the
Hmm.
organization on what they can do to make the organization better, and they see with their own ideas, left and right brain ideas that they're coming up with, and especially if they spark some really good insights that
Hmm.
they add into the discussion, and that's helpful. Then they come home and go, well, I've got this book and he said that we can apply it to our personal lives as well. Well, where am I stuck in my personal
Right.
life? Like,
Hmm.
what do I need to work on? And then, as you know, the book is written through the lens of the lies we tell ourselves, and
Right.
maybe something applies to everyone. And so I always tell people you don't have to read the whole book. You just have to read the parts you don't want to. because
Yeah, right.
that's where you see yourself reflected, and you're like, oh, geez,
Yeah.
there's an opportunity to learn and to grow and to get moved past that place where we're stuck.
Yeah, and it seems also though that part of making the what comes out of this process really valuable for people is asking the right questions too. So do you have a method for or a formula for how to approach and craft the right questions?
Yeah, generally they're open-ended.
Hmm.
They are typically specific to the problem. So if, for instance, someone's feeling like they do not like their boss at work and they can't figure out how to forge a better relationship, the question can be that the simple, obvious one are generally the best. Like, how do I craft a better relationship with my boss?
Hmm.
Or another one can be why? Why am I in conflict with my boss? Because
Hmm.
generally, when you ask the why, you get to the deeper issues psychologically that are going on there, and then the rest can be tactical. Then the rest can be
Right.
okay. Given that, how do I form a better relationship? What steps can I take? And
Right.
just it's sort of like being. I often liken it to the using the left side, the conventional, thoughtful approach as the patient, and then having the patient ask the right side of the brain, which becomes the wise therapist. Like, okay,
Hmm.
what do I do? How can I do it? And going to that source of wisdom, the higher consciousness, to ask any question,
Right.
any question that comes up at all. And as you know, in the book, there are, I think, 52 of them. So it's a great way to practice because there's a lot of questions that you can get used to answering. And then once you're in the rhythm of asking questions and getting answers, then you kind of feel the
Get the
kind of the
hang of it.
way that works, and it's easier to stay in that mode.
I agree totally that the question why is such a simple one word question is very powerful. It really helps you to kind of keep digging in further and further until you get to the base,
Yeah.
root problem. So,
As Simon Sinek famously is all about the why, right? Why
mhm.
are we doing something? It's about getting to the why is super helpful.
Well, I know we're running out of time. It seems like it went by in a flash, but I want to ask you a couple final questions here before we close out. And if somebody is just getting used to this idea for the first time, even not just of this practice of right brain inquiry, but even just tapping into their intuition and they're just feeling really stuck and disconnected. What's the one piece of advice, if there's going to be one takeaway from this, that you would give them to sort of get unstuck?
Um, well, I would suggest they try this, and I mean,
Mhm.
I put out there. It's been, gosh, maybe 10 years now almost, but a TEDx talk, unlocking the brain's hidden app. So that explains how to do it in real time,
Oh,
which I did
perfect.
it with an audience of 1,200 back then, and everybody. We kind of broke the typical structure of a TEDx talk, and people had a pen and a piece of paper, so they learned how to do this in the 17-minute talk, so people can experience it in real time if they want to try that. It's, if they can obviously get the book, which is, if they do, I'll make an extra dollar from Simon and Schuster. It's but I put it out there to help people. I mean, that's
Right.
that's why I did it. To make it easier so that people don't have to spend the money to go to a workshop or do something that's way more expensive. So yeah, I think they'll
Yeah.
I think they'll find it helpful. They can look at Lucia's book if that applies, Recover Your Inner Child. They can look at Betty Edwards' book, Drawing on the Right Side of the Brain. They
Hmm.
can look at mine, obviously, Thought Revolution: How to Unlock Your Inner Genius. So I think just investing in yourself,
Sure.
just pull away from watching a show for one night and read something that can potentially change your life.
Sure. Well, hopefully this podcast will be the catalyst for anybody who's listening here. And,
And
there's
you've
been
offered very
a lot of
compelling evidence,
suggestions.
so in your own experience. So,
Yeah.
and hopefully, I have testified as to the huge impact it's had on my life.
Well, I think everything I had gone through that I explained earlier in the interview, it was, I've been on a journey for several years, but there's just continuously little pieces to the puzzle that keep coming into my life. And this was another one that has been very valuable for me, because it's easy to, even when you're on this sort of healing journey and this new path, it's easy to still get stuck on a regular basis. And these are just
I'll
some simple
I'll
ways
ask
to
you a
get you
second
unstuck.
question. Have you
Pardon?
done? I'll
Oh,
ask you a second question. You don't have to
mhm.
answer it now, but have you done the question that I did at 48? What is the highest and best purpose of the rest of my life?
I don't think I will answer that, but because I don't think I've actually done that specific question. I don't know if I was avoiding it because it was such a huge question, but I'm going to now. I'm going
Yeah,
to definitely
I
do
think
that.
yeah, get back to me on that because I'm curious to hear what you get. I think you've been so thoughtful about and reflective about all the things you've been up to. And I know from the email exchanges, you asked
Mhm.
me a lot of really good questions. So I'm sending that one back your way.
All right, I will answer you for sure. And again, going back to your generosity, the fact that I took a chance and decided to send you a random email, and the fact that you gave me such a thoughtful response was very heartwarming. So thank you.
Well, I love it when people are going for it and are being intentional and thoughtful and curious and in the learning mode, because I always want to be in those modes myself. So
Hmm.
bravo.
Well, thank you. And you did mention to me that you're working on another book. It might be a little ways out, but you're still doing some workshops as well, not just for companies, but for individuals. So where are the various different ways that people can find you now? And do you have
Yeah,
anything
I
you can
have
tell us
a
about the next book?
Sure. I have a website, williamdonius.com. I teach this at different times in different places at the Modern Elder Academy, at CREA. I've taught in Italy and Mind Camp in Canada. The Esalen Institute is where I also serve on their board of trustees. So
Hmm.
I teach there twice a year. One's coming up in mid-August of this year, another workshop. And then in Switzerland at the business school there, IMD in Lausanne, and then invitations, at various things around the country as they pop up, and I guess that's and the book is on. The kind of picks up where the last one left off. It's on the soul's journey
Hmm.
and what we need to learn about this life and why we chose this life and going further, like what pieces of wisdom we may get from those who have already, checked out and moved on. Because I've been surprised since my parents passed at, some of what's possible to learn and from messages and that are, because I believe the right brain is also connected to the collective consciousness. So it's not just our own right brain in our head, but it's
Mm.
else is also there for us. So it's both things together.
Well, I will definitely be a reader of that one because I'm intrigued by that whole world as well, which we don't have too much time to get into now. So that'll be the next
Yeah.
interview when the time is right.
Thanks, Kay. Really
Perfect.
appreciate it.
Well, thank you, Bill. Really appreciate you being here. Take care. Thank you for joining me for this eye-opening conversation with Bill Donius. I hope this episode offered a new perspective about the power of intuition and how practices like intuitive writing can unlock deeper wisdom, healing, and creative solutions in both your professional and personal life. Bill's journey from a high-level banking career to becoming a guide for intuitive problem solving is a powerful reminder that fulfillment often begins when we learn to trust something beyond logic. Whether it's accessing repressed truths, making better decisions, or simply connecting more deeply with ourselves, the right brain has so much more to offer than we often give it credit for, and accessing our intuition is a universal tool regardless of our background or income. If this conversation resonated with you, I invite you to explore how to more regularly access your own intuition, your own intuitive voice. You don't need fancy tools or a retreat, just a willingness to slow down, get quiet, and listen to the voice deep inside of you. Thank you for being here. If you enjoyed this episode, please follow, rate, and review it, and share it with someone who you think will benefit from it. Until next time, keep connecting with your soul.